Today, two special guests join us to talk about when it's a good time to surrender your ship and why pool noodles can be deadly. We also ask the question, can an old school finger puzzle bring down the flagship of the Federation? Stick with us to find out.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the #1 place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I am your co-host, Shereese.
And I'm Andrea. Shereese, today we are talking about Season 1, Episode 4, The Last Outpost. This episode was written by, and if you forgive me, Richard Kurzmian and Herbert Wright, directed by Rich Cola, and the star date is 41386.4. And today, Shereese, we have some special treats. We have brothers Cameron and Spencer Rogers to be guests today, and I'm going to turn it right over to you guys. Thank you guys so much for being with us.
Hey, it's my pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
So one of the things we like to do with our guests is find out a little bit more about them and their history with Star Trek. So, are you guys like longtime fans of the show, or is this kind of a new love?
Spencer's a longtime fan. Like I'm kind of more like I conceptually like Star Trek as an idea. I like the kind of utopic viewpoint, but Spencer is like my encyclopedic knowledge of like episodes, characters, things like that. And then I use him to like connect with 3D artists who like TNG or just Star Trek in general, because that's a really common thing in that scene.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Yeah, I liked Star Trek when I was a kid. I didn't really get into it until college, and then like pirated all of the seasons of every Star Trek ever made, and every movie, and kind of sat and binge watched the entire Star Trek universe. And then ever since then, I've been hooked on it.
Yeah, what I was just gonna say, it was on at our grandparents' house all the time when we were growing up, and like they weren't like watching it the way that we would all watch it. They were watching it the way that like people casually could watch Star Trek. So episodes would like run, and our grandmother would try to contextualize like where this was happening in the world, and we would just be kids that were like, "Oh yeah, I don't know what any of that means, but okay." Like, you keep explaining to me what this character is.
Yeah. So Andrea and I talked about that a little bit on for the first episode of Season 1, which is called Encounter at Farpoint Station. We were just like, because we both got into it as kids as well. And I was just reflecting, like, how in the world as a kid did I understand anything that was going on? And I think I solved it. I'm pretty sure I started watching it in Season 2, the way I always rewatch it now, how I always go back to Season 2, because Season 1 is just like not super kid friendly. You're like, what is going on?
Yeah.
So
I'm watching it. I'm rewatching it for this podcast, and it's not super adult friendly either. It's just not a great season.
Maybe it's not. Season 1's not that friendly. Last question before we get into this episode: who is your favorite character, if you have one?
I'm like a Geordi fan. Like I love reading Rainbow, and so it's like
Geordi?
hard for me to not. Yeah, Geordi. Sorry,
Did you just call him Gordy? Okay, you're off the show.
Sorry.
What? Let's just go ahead and Zoom. Like, we're gonna hang up on Zoom immediately.
Sorry. I'm like always like messing.
It's okay. We'll forgive you.
Like if you have me on any other podcast about sitcoms, you'll be like, oh my God, this guy has watched so much television. What is wrong with his
like an unhealthy amount?
Yeah, it's like, okay, how has a 30-year-old guy seen all of MASH and all of I apologize.
You know what? You're gonna stay on the phone after the rest of everybody else hangs up, and we're just gonna talk Golden Girls. So
I can do that.
He can do Golden Girls plenty.
All right, so Geordi, you're a big Geordi fan because he's awesome. Okay.
Wait, was it the visor or was it just Geordi because he was
the visor and LeVar Burton as Reading Rainbow? I mean, Reading Rainbow was like everything. Yeah, so like it's hard to look past a cool ass visor and Reading Rainbow.
Agreed. Spence.
It's a toss up. There's a few of them. I mean, Picard obviously is like way high up on the list.
That's cheating.
Who doesn't love him?
Only monsters.
I'm dropping his name right now, but the commander of Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, I gotta look it up at some point here. But he was always one of my, I don't know, I really liked Deep Space Nine because it really got into all the like nuts and bolts of like the political structure of everything going on.
100%. Yeah, I
really
that.
boring, but it created a whole lot of drama that you could follow, and you know, it was a lot of fun.
But, and it was interesting because the Deep Space Nine was not a spaceship traveling the galaxy like all of the other shows.
Problems were coming to them.
Yeah, basically. they were a space station. They don't move, they don't leave, and people just show up and then people leave. And so that was more, I guess, a little more sitcom-y in that way, that it's like a home base that people kind of come in and out of. So that was actually kind of a different type of a show, right?
Yeah, but I've been really interested going back and watching the old ones. It might have even been Cameron that had said this a while, that he was pointing out that it's interesting to see how like early Star Trek, the society is super utopic, and everything is great and perfect, and they could like, Gene Roddenberry could envision this and thought it was something that people could understand. And as the Star Trek universe has continued on, we've all become so cynical now that we can't possibly believe that the human race would get that. So all the new Star Treks, there's always like some big corrupt government thing that, you know, somebody is overturning everything and destroying, because we all just can't deal with the idea of people
like coming together and overcoming differences.
Yeah, but it makes me miss these early ones where there's this hope that we're gonna figure it out. We're gonna like find that perfect. And this was a great example of that too, because they're being they're testing humanity, and that like Riker's whole thing comes down to like the test is whether or not you give in to fear or like can hold your composure in the face of disaster, and that it's like
So you obviously did not watch the super racist episode like 2 episodes before this one,
or the super racist episode that's going to be like 2 episodes after this one. But that's okay. That's okay, because the idea of a utopic Starfleet is there, but I think all the other non-Starfleet aliens are like brutal savages who need to be tamed.
I mean, that's like my issue with the Ferengi.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This episode really shows it too. Look at the Ferengi. They're supposed to be a hyper greedy race that's focused only on money. They have giant noses and giant ears
and brown skin. It's like it's racism in a character. Like, oh yeah, this is every caricature we've ever done.
We're going to dig into that because we need to talk a little bit more about that. Before we do, let's have Andrea read in our episode so everybody else can catch up on what we're talking about.
All right, so the plot for this episode is that the Enterprise is in pursuit of a Ferengi vessel, which has stolen an energy converter from an unmanned Federation outpost. As the chase passes the planet Delphi Ardu 4, both ships suffer power drains, causing them to come to a halt. Each crew initially believes the power drain is caused by the other vessel, but Picard realizes that the Ferengi are as confused as they are and orders the crew to investigate the planet. All right, so before we get too far into the episode, Cam, you mentioned that Geordi is your favorite character, and I have some like really cool little like deep dive information that I found about him as a character. So when they were casting the show in like 86, 87, LeVar Burton was the biggest star of the entire cast at the time. So this was like a huge get actually, like for the show to be like, oh yeah, we got LeVar Burton.
Yeah, Roots. He was like such a big star from Roots.
Yep.
It like changed the media landscape. So it really makes sense, and it was such a big diversion. It wasn't just, this historical thing. It was now like he's in a sci-fi thing.
Yeah. So now he's like crossing over like these different boundaries. The other there's a couple cool things. So a number of famous actors auditioned to be Geordi LaForge, including Wesley Snipes, which I had like never. Can you imagine Wesley Snipes of Blade? Like,
I want to see that audition reel.
It was probably epic. So I love hearing when actors tried out for roles that didn't work out, because you're just like, I mean, you could just see him slaying vampires and aliens all on the bridge and stuff. Like, that's crazy. And Brent Spiner, who plays Data, originally tried out for the role of Riker.
I could see that. So a lot of characters. So what I'm learning upon like finding out more about these characters is that so many people audition for, like, an actor will go in, like the sound of a show and audition for like 4 or 5 different characters, and they'll kind of pick from there. So a number of people auditioned to be Geordi, a number of people auditioned to be Captain Picard and Data, and I'll get into that. So a really interesting tidbit that I like loved learning about Geordi is that in creating this Geordi LaForge character, there was a real life super fan of the original Star Trek series. His name was George LaForge, and he was a quadriplegic and unfortunately passed away before TNG came out. And Gene Roddenberry really like loved that and took that to heart. So he basically created a physically like disabled character that basically had like that name George LaForge, but just tweaked a little bit to Geordi. So it was very important to Gene Roddenberry that Geordi be born blind and just like, and have this visor, but he had some sort of like physical like disability.
That's awesome.
Which I was like, wow, that like gave me a lot of feels like reading that, like seeing how like he just took that to heart and created this character that like so many people love.
And really turned it too. It wasn't a physical disability. It was a physical ability that he had that was different from everyone else's, because it wasn't like he was blind and could see nothing and could only be braille on the ship or something, right? It was like he was born blind, so therefore he had this visor that helped him see like infrared and energy waves and all kinds of crazy like super stuff. Yeah, he's like a tricorder.
Yeah, spoiler, you get to see the world through Geordi's eyes in a few episodes, I think.
Yeah, you do. And it's actually really interesting the way that they do that with like the different colors, and you start to see it like, holy cow, is this how you actually see this? Yeah. So LeVar Burton, which I think is funny. So the character of Geordi was born blind and was able to see with this visor. But LeVar Burton, who's a seeing actor, was basically rendered blind by putting the visor on, which is like ironic and terrible. So they basically took the pinnacle of 80s fashion, the banana clip, and attached it to his head. And it had to have like blinders on the inside so you couldn't see through it, you know, as a viewer. And so LeVar was like tripping all over cables and bumping into cameras and stuff. Like he just couldn't see anything ever. And then in season 2, way fun, they made it like this much heavier, like more sturdy thing that had to be screwed into the side of his head. So he had like a migraine for like 13 years or 9 years or whatever, like wearing this thing. Yeah, they basically put these little like panels on and then screwed the visor into the panels, which is just like, oh, poor LeVar. Like, all right. So anyway, back to this episode. So the overall idea of meeting like a relic of an old civilization is so cool. I think they did a terrible job like executing that. It's so bad. It's so cheesy. But when you think about like what the big idea is, it's like, oh, cool. We're going to like find this like relic of a civilization that's already died out, but like a part of its consciousness is like still here and like you can interact with it. Like that's super dope. And you guys botched it so badly. Like it's so bad.
Okay, I want to hear your thoughts on the Ferengi, but before we do that, I just have to say, in our last episode, I was complaining about the racism level, about how the aliens were really just African Americans, or maybe they were supposed to be African, but they were like dressed Arabian, I don't know. And they just had scars on their faces, and that was their alien look. And I just was like, you can't even make them look like aliens. Like there's no effort in that. However, I will say with the Ferengi, they look like legit aliens. Like they did make them look different. They don't just look like regular people with like a scar on their eyebrow or something lame. Like they look like complete different otherworldly beings. So I was like, I still felt that racism vibe coming through, but at least it didn't look like a people group that I'm very familiar with.
Yeah, if anything, it's more like Nazi level propaganda of like hybridizing.
Thank you.
You know, it's I see like every crazy like element of like blackface, anti-Semitism. It's like we're just gonna like hate everybody, and then
yes, it's so bad. I mean, and you're only concerned with like money and gold and commerce and trade. Yeah. Like, could you be more anti-Semitic?
And like one of the other funny aspects from like a modern perspective is that they're also like incels essentially, like by like you know there's like men like females,
yes,
lows. It's like, oh my god, like this is like a problem now and a problem then.
This is the problem that just keeps on giving.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we really want to keep unpacking this. Okay, like
yes, and they're just painful,
and they jump around like apes. So that was
it's like they just jump. Yeah, they
stopped doing that. They stopped doing that. They had the Ferengi on a few more times in this in the TNG world, and then they became a thing in Deep Space Nine. But thankfully, they stopped the whole monkey jumping way that they walk, and they just started walking like regular people.
Really evolved the character, the species. I don't know. I thought somebody once told me that all of the species, other than humans, of course, but all of the other species are supposed to represent some piece of what Roddenberry saw as the human condition. So, like the Ferengis are supposed to be like kind of vices. They're greed and gluttony and all of the just excess, right, of humanity, which I guess makes their design a little bit worse. But
a lot of it worse.
The Klingons are our fighting spirit and all that kind of stuff. The Vulcans are our logic and
yeah, I never actually thought of that. Okay, so this is the first time we ever hear of the Ferengi or meet the Ferengi. Gene Roddenberry had relied very heavily in the original series on the Vulcans and the Klingons as the main antagonists. And in writing this show, he said, I don't want any Klingons and I don't want any Vulcans, which obviously that rule was broken because we have Worf, who's a Klingon, and we see Klingons later. But this was his first alien race that we meet in Next Generation. And they
that was meant to be a stay around alien race, right?
Yes,
because we've seen several alien races come and go so far.
Well, yeah, and it builds it out a lot more too. Like, that's the thing, is that if you're only seeing two kind of consistent races, it's like, is this universe really as big as you're implying? So kind of filtering in more, builds out that perception, I think, better.
Well, I mean, and a lot of the plot drive from original series is about discovering the Klingons and what they're all about and learning about that species. So he kind of needed a new one too for, and the Ferengi end up being a big piece of that in Next Generation.
They do make more of an appearance, I think, in Deep Space Nine. I don't know off the top of my head, but I know that they're only in a handful of TNG episodes because the producers couldn't quite find a niche for them to fill without being just too comedic and ridiculous, which they very obviously are in this episode. They're unwatchably bad. Mm-hmm. At least for me, I kept looking at the timestamp being there's 25 more minutes of this. This is so hard.
I mean, I think that's where I struggle with it, is that there's a lot of parts of this episode that lack subtlety on a pretty intense level. And with and even with Riker and the posing of them versus Riker in that situation where they're both just on these opposite ends of a teeter-totter that doesn't really make sense. You don't end up walking away being wow, Riker was a really stand-up guy, because you're well, his opposition is clearly this insane self-centered monkey creature thing that's weirdly uncomfortable in every way, shape, and form. Why is that?
we don't like them, but they
set the bar real low there.
Yeah, they did. Well, also I just could not help but think how bad the halitosis must have been on those Ferengi, because they're mouth breathing everywhere. And I thought as an actor, it's you're probably please pack extra sticks of gum or something before you have to shoot these scenes and be breathing all over someone's face. It's just, I think that they're designed to be repugnant, which they bring that across very well. But yeah, they're so one note, they lack the Romulans. I love when we see Romulans in TNG because they are supposed to be the bad guy, but they have kind of logic on their side, but not always. And they're more stuff. They're more multifaceted. The Ferengi are just awful, greedy, chipmunky, chimpanzee type. It's just problematic all around.
Yeah, I think the Romulans and the Cardassians and stuff, they make better villains. They're more well-rounded villains, and they make a good adversary. Ferengis are not really an opponent. They're like a mosquito, right? They're buzzing around. You're get out of here. And we're so I think it's just a different type of alien.
I suppose that's true, because when you think about the really scary villain of TNG, which is the Borg, they're terrifying. To this day, they're still terrifying.
They're still scary. They definitely stand the test of time.
They don't follow logic or reason. You can't argue with them. And so when you think of the Borg versus the Ferengi, you're oh, you guys are just annoying. You're just kind of a pest.
I think the way I would have liked to see, when they introduce the Ferengi in the show, and they use that, I think it's such a ham job when they're like the Yankee trader kind of component.
Yes.
When they start introducing them, there's kind of this mystery about them, like you're kind of expecting to kind of encounter this roguish group that maybe isn't representing themselves entirely at face value. There's probably another double cross in here somewhere. And so I think that's the letdown with them, is that you're expecting some kind of cunning double cross,
sophistication,
but instead it's just like a childhood prank, right? They show up and they just shoot them. There was no cunning, there was no secret. There was just hey, we beamed down. Where is everybody? Blech! And they just get shot with laser pool noodles, which was our first time seeing an alien weapon on the show. We don't see a lot of alien weaponry in the Star Trek universe in general. We do see some Romulan disruptors in Voyager, and maybe some space battles, but we usually don't see alien weaponry at all, or alien scanning equipment or any of that. This is our first time seeing an alien weapon, and it's a pool noodle, and I thought that was awesome. And they never bring them back. But they just have these cool little pool noodles where you just whip it and boom, it zaps electricity at people. I was like, okay, that's neat. I like that electric pool noodle. That's kind of cool.
But don't go swimming with it.
And it's the most alien of the alien weapons that show up. I mean, the batleth is a little bit weird. The sword,
Yeah. And disruptors are guns. Yeah, it's you're right. This is a whip. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a weird one.
Okay. Well, let me steer us back towards the episode, because then we're going to start getting super duper meta. At this point in the episode, they are chasing down the Ferengi. They've gotten near this planet, and both of the ships have lost power. And one of the things that Picard does immediately is basically asking the Ferengi for terms of surrender, which really bothered me, because in the first episode, Encounter at Farpoint, they meet Q for the first time and then immediately freaking surrender. It's wait a second. Picard, we learn more about him in subsequent seasons, and he's not the surrendery type, but in 4 episodes he's already tried to surrender twice. It's should we have given you this starship? Do you know how much this ship costs? How many lives? Wait, no, you don't just give it up.
They juxtapose that with Tasha Yar and Worf, who Andrea pointed out off camera was basically the same character. As far as their response to things, Tasha Yar and Worf are the same. Yeah,
they're we'll just fight. We'll just fight to the death.
Yeah, so I think they're trying to counter. They're trying to show his democratic, side or something, contrasted with their let's just fight. Because in Encounter in Farpoint Station, and in this as well, it's always let's just fire everything we have. Let's just fire all of our weapons. I think that's going to solve this problem.
At the same time.
Right, at the same time. And then Picard's always and what's that going to accomplish? We're going to have no weapons and we're going to die. We need another way. So I think part of that is the diplomatic side of him that they're trying to show, but it does come off kind of a little passive. Because I will say in Voyager with Captain Janeway, she's quick to self-destruct her ship. In a heartbeat. She's all about saving her crew, but let somebody get on the ship and try to take it over, and she'll be you know what? Self-destruct, Janeway Alpha Pi, 10 seconds. And she'll be let's do it. You want this ship? You're going to have it in pieces.
She comes ready to rumble.
Yeah, she's always we won't even fight. We'll just blow ourselves up. You're not getting our ship. And Picard never does that. He never self-destructs the ship. Never.
He's willing to a few times, though. I mean, there's a couple of times that he's willing to take it to that level if he has to. I don't know. I think Picard, it's interesting because they set it up early on with him making a point to comment how uncomfortable he is around kids and family and stuff like that. So I think part of it is early on, especially, he's so used to being on a ship that everybody there is Starfleet, and they've all signed on to this and have agreed, I accept there's a risk I'm gonna die here. But now he's on a ship that has family on it, and in the first episode he makes a point to say that in that first report, and point out, this is the first time I've been on a ship that actually has a family, that has families on it. And so he's now suddenly oh God, if I charge in guns blaring, then I might get a bunch of kids killed, and that's why he doesn't want kids on the bridge or anything like that. That's a reminder to him of what's on the line right now, and
I think that's actually a really legit point, because you're right. It's not a battleship where you're just we came to play and let's do this. This is we have 1,000 plus people on the ship, and a bunch of them are kids. So I guess the surrender does make sense. I do think it's pretty funny, like the way that they wrote that gambit playing out, where he's like, we're prepared to accept your terms, or we want to hear your terms. And the Ferengi are like, no, we're not going to surrender ever. It's like, wait, did you think, did I think we were both trying to surrender to each other? Like, whoopsie.
Yeah, it feels like a sitcom like level, like, oh, okay, like the old switch. Well, okay. as like a first time kind of watcher in this scenario, like the funniest thing about it is that it's like the lead up to conflict feels so like devoid of actual conflict. Like, you know, and I mean, they're not hamming it up either. You know, like every time they get hit, it's caught by the shield. So they don't move at all. There's like no response, but like, you're looking at it from like a tension point of view, like as a first time watcher, it's kind of like, wow, not a lot is actually happening here, but I'm being told a lot's happening and they're worried. So like, that's why it's a little hard for me at times where I'm like, okay, like I need a little bit more tonal push, you know?
I don't know. I'm thinking about it a little bit too with this one. He doesn't surrender right away, actually. He calls them up first and talks to them about that they've stolen this thing and they need to return it. And they don't respond. And it's not until Deanna turns to him and, you know, and they're saying, well, why don't we try and contact him again? And he says, you know, they're not responding. We've tried that. They're not responding to us. And she says, well, you haven't told them anything they want to hear. And
that's
so then
true.
He's turning around saying, let's negotiate. You know,
so I am not on average a big fan of Deanna Troy's character. I think she's pretty one note in season 1. I actually grow to really like her as a character a lot because there's a lot of growth like on her end and like an expansion of her role. But Shereese and I often joke that like she doesn't really do anything of value in the first season, but she is the only one who goes, you know, in only paying attention to each other, we've sort of ignored what's going on in the planet or on the planet. And like, we might need to investigate that further. And then Picard goes, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see, you know, and it turns out the whole problem is on the planet, which before we get to the planet though, can we talk about Data and the Chinese finger trap? Like I still die laughing over that.
Yeah, I was like, oh, come on. So as you guys know, listeners, Data's my favorite character. And all the characters are still being developed because it's season 1. So none of them are super awesome yet. But in that scene, I'm just like, now I know good and well, Data can pick up a freaking shuttlecraft with one hand. Why can he not just rip open this Chinese finger trap?
I mean, unless he's trying to not break it, you know, because he knows there's got to be he knows
he's in a meeting with his. But he is in a meeting with his superiors with his fingers stuck in a trap, and instead of just breaking it and having the meeting, he's like getting distracted and can't follow his train of thought, and he can't even complete the conversation because his fingers are just so stuck. I was like, if anybody else did this, like I would maybe buy it, but also I'd be like, really? But Data of all people, I'm like,
also those uniforms don't have any pockets. Where the hell did you get a finger trap from? Did you bring it in from another room to be like, let me just bring this toy in with me to a meeting?
He's already stuck when he comes in the room.
Oh, is he?
So he was playing with this thing and then got called into a meeting and was like, what do I do?
Oh no, what do I do? I guess I'll just go in the meeting.
Maybe if I just keep my fingers under the table, nobody will notice.
But he didn't. He didn't put his fingers under the table. He's doing this.
He's been told the rules of this game are that he's got to get his fingers out without breaking the thing, right? And now the other rule that's popped in is I've got to go to a meeting. So the solution that breaks neither of those rules technically is going to the meeting with the things on your fingers still and trying to figure it out. And it's been set up that this is a shit that those kind of shenanigans they get away with. I mean, think about the end of the very last shot of the episode is them saying like, let's go. And Geordi's like,
Okay, this to me is very problematic. Like, I could see maybe you have your fingers stuck in a finger trap. I can't even believe we're having this conversation. I can see like, you have your fingers stuck, and you go to a meeting and you try to like subtly get your fingers out of there, but you are literally on duty, Geordi, steering a probably quadrillion-dollar ship, which needs fingers, and you're sitting there playing on duty. How did you not get demoted right then and there?
Because he had no pockets. He couldn't hide it.
No, he's knee wheeling it.
I loved that moment. I did. That made me like his face was like, like he was starting to get a little flustered. And like, I watched this episode yesterday for our recording today, and I was still dying laughing. I thought it was the funniest freaking thing.
Well, and also he has this encyclopedic knowledge of alien cultures from, that humanity has never come in contact with, but like, there's nothing in his brain that's like, oh yeah, this is but like, I know about this. Yeah, I know about Outpost that we've never come into contact with, but no, this thing, whoa.
Alien technology. You get to know Data's creator,
That's true. Yeah, maybe it was called the Japanese finger trap in Data's processing unit, and he didn't have the keywords. So. Oh God, that killed me.
Can we talk about, just like big picture, can we talk about our feelings about what's going on in the planet versus what's going on in the ship? Because while they're on the planet trying to figure out whatever's going on, they're being shot by Ferengi pool noodles and whatever. Up on the ship, we have the power being drained more and more and more, and everyone is slowly dying. Like, life support is failing.
And that entire situation, like, I feel like the way it escalates so much off screen while they're on the planet really makes that, like, I don't know, once again, we're going back to tonal shift, where it just like where he's talking about dying, it's like, whoa. You guys really haven't been in that level of the picture yet. You just kind of gave like a journal entry to put us here. And now it's like,
yeah,
it's coming at us a little too hot and fast. At that moment,
and honestly, what we see is you guys just handing out blankets to people because it's getting cold. Suddenly everybody's dying. It's like,
now you're dying. And actually, to Cam's point of the tonal shifts, we've seen this in previous episodes leading up to this, where like with the Code of Honor, for example, when they are trying to get this special vaccine for this planet that has this pandemic going on, it's the same thing where like they're having this foxy boxy battle on the planet, where on this other planet, everyone's just dying by the millions, right? Just droves are just dying. And like these few episodes, they're trying to really hype up the drama by saying whatever's going on is really important, because if they don't succeed, people are going to die. And not just one person, but like the whole planet, or like the whole ship, or like the whole universe. They're doing these big sweeps of like mass destruction as a subplot, which was kind of a thing in the beginning. I think they kind of come out of that and make it a little more smooth moving forward.
Yeah, because they're not good at anchoring that too well. Where like it ups the stakes just too much, I think, too quickly, and you're just not brought there.
It doesn't give us the opportunity to sort of arrive there on our own or be like guided there. We're just kind of yanked to that position and be like, oh, suddenly everybody's dying. Okay.
No oxygen. We're gonna die right now. Sorry.
There's no oxygen. There's no heat. And you're like, come on, people on the planet, like stop fighting with the Ferengi. Figure it out, because everyone up there is dying.
Yeah. Well, so we're back on the planet. The crystals are doing their thing, and then we see what basically looks like
Space Wizard.
So we see this dude with like just the worst makeup and hair, and oh god, and he basically ends up being this like destroyer of worlds. And then Riker answers his riddle correctly, and suddenly he's like, walk with me, my boy, let's talk about this. Like, what? Wait a second, what are you talking about? Like, and he even said, like, in his little chat with Riker as they were strolling through the park, like, I would have naturally like have destroyed both of your ships. Just,
well, he said he was going to blow them up because they were fighting. He was like, when I saw you guys fighting, I was just going to blow you both up. I saw you guys bickering with each other. I was just going to like, let's just end it, because you guys are not, like, you guys are savages, basically, right? It was back to that whole savages scene. And then he was telling Riker, but now that I've looked into your mind and read your thoughts, I can tell that you're not a savage, unlike these Ferengi.
Yeah, exactly. So like, unpacking that racism thing, it totally felt like these little guys, no, they're doing it the wrong way. Like, when I kill you, it's the right way.
Yeah, and then can we say just one more thing that annoyed me about the Ferengi, that kind of annoys me because they keep this up for a while, is like the way that the Ferengi speak, where they're kind of like, hello, human, like they have this really thick accent. And I'm like, they're the only aliens with an accent. Everyone else speaks perfect English because of the universal translator. Everybody speaks perfect English.
That's true.
The translator means you have no accent. Like, everybody speaks perfect English. Everyone sounds perfect to everybody else. So I was like, why are they speaking this like broken English type of deal? Like,
the Ferengi learned actual English.
But why? Because even the people in the Federation don't all speak English. That's the point of the universal translator. Is
traders, they want to be able to talk to as many different species as they can. I don't know. I don't actually know this.
I'm willing to put it out there. I just feel bad for the Ferengi because they're so stupid. They just suck. Yeah. They just suck in general. So you know what? Maybe they did learn English because they are traders and their existence depends on them being able to communicate. So maybe.
I will say they developed Ferengi a lot better throughout the Star Trek universe, because by the end of Ferengi, like by the time we get to DS9, by the time we have Quark, who shows up, who actually is in this episode, by the way, his name is Latek, but he is Quark, like the super famous, the one famous Ferengi that shows up later on. I do like those Ferengi. I think they're funny. I think they're interesting. They always add something spicy to the mix. Like, they develop them into a character that's really fun. They're just not there yet. Just like all of the characters are still getting their sea legs.
They really pumped up like the subtlety, which I really like. It wasn't so black and white and so in your face. And I think it's more true to life. Like when you meet new groups of people or you have different interpersonal relationships, it's not always just in your face and black and white. Like it's multifaceted. And I actually really, really like that in later seasons or past season 1. And I'm sorry that the reason that there was that shift in the show is because Gene Roddenberry became ill and had to like step back. But I think it made the show endlessly better because it was like, he was really trying to like force this idea of like this utopian society, but people are more nuanced than that. And it became, a lot of episodes became really like cartoonish almost in their like attempt to like ram this like lesson down your throat. Well, guys, I feel like we kind of got to the end. I mean, like power is restored, everybody's fine, and we've lived to make it to another mission, which thank God, because this was not one of our good ones.
On our closing notes, can I also say thematically, the weirdest part about it is like, I think Star Trek does a good job of defining like what kind of conflicts are happening. And in this episode, there's like a lot of conflicts that aren't really well explained or explored. And like, even when you get to the planet, like they're trying to make it this scientific explanation, but then magically this space wizard also controls the planet. So like I think that's like a really solid example of this episode's like very muddled idea of conflict and how to approach it and then how to resolve it in a meaningful way. So I don't know.
This reminds me of like when kids want different things for dinner and mom or dad tries to make like ham sandwiches and lasagna and spaghetti meatballs and soup, and it's just everybody gets something different and none of them are actually that great because they're not fully fleshed out like ideas. It's like you guys tried maybe a few too many things, and like there's 25 episodes in season 1. You guys got the contract for 25 seasons. Like maybe tease some of those ideas out a little bit better.
Yeah. You don't need the chase episode, the standoff episode. It's like they're like, no, we got to cover this list. If we don't do it this episode, we're not going to hit every one of these topics. If we don't do it now, we'll never do it.
I love that.
Yeah, you can't get it all, I guess. Well, on that note, I'm going to put the stamp of approval or maybe disapproval on this episode and say we did it. We made it to the end, which I got to tell you, watching this episode last night, I was like, oh, how many more minutes are there until this is over? This is so bad. Yeah. Netflix is like, are you still watching? And I'm like, barely.
Yeah, me too. And at the end, when the space wizard came, I was just like, wait, what? So yeah, when it was finished, I was just like, just like, let's just stop this.
Next week, we are going to be reviewing one of my favorite episodes of season 1, which is Where No One Has Gone Before. I have so much love for that episode. So if you feel I was a little down on this episode, take heart, because next week, I've got nothing but love for that one.
Thank you so much, Spencer and Cameron, for being on our show. We really appreciate that you came to geek out with us today.
Oh yeah, it was our pleasure.
Thanks, Dad. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.